Pokémon is a franchise that's been around for almost 3 decades. And within those 28 years, there's over 1,000 different kinds of Pokémon to battle and catch. And I'm sure many of you out there have forgotten at least one of them. So today's video is going to be a mini-series going over each generation to see what Pokémon that players have forgotten that existed. I'll be kicking off this series starting off with the first generation, and one that I'm sure most Pokémon fans are well aware of. All 151 Pokémon, which probably has the least amount of Pokémon that people have forgotten. Unless, of course, you've never played those games. That being Pokémon Red, Blue, or the original Japanese Green version, Pokémon Yellow, and the remakes of Fire Red and Leaf Green, and last but certainly not least, the best looking versions, Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. And for those people, don't be surprised if there's Pokemon that you don't remember, because there are some people probably out there that may have forgotten. Starting off this list, you guys, we're going to be looking at Spearow. And I have this Pokemon on this list because I'm sure most players have passed this up for Pidgey instead. For me, this was certainly the case because I assumed growing up that Pidgey was the better bird Pokemon. It was only when I played a Nuzlocke that getting Spearow was actually really good. Cause it not only fully evolves at level 20, but its base stats rivals that of Pidgeot. While Pidgey, on the other hand, only grows a little stronger when evolves into Pidgeotto at level 18, and you have to wait until level 36 to become Pidgeot. So definitely in the beginning of the game, Spearow becomes way stronger. But again, most people that have watched the anime, you favor Pidgey, and probably have forgotten or just completely ignored Spearow. Next up for Generation 1 is probably Seel and Dugong. Now, just like Spearow, this is probably a Pokemon that people are aware of, but probably they've never really used. I mean, even Lorelei from the Elite Four has it on their team. And maybe this is just me, but really, how many people would actually use this Pokemon? Because whenever I used an Ice-type Pokemon, I usually would prefer the free Lapras that you get at the Silph building, or Jinx that you can obtain even earlier in the games if by chance you trade a Poliwhirl with an NPC in Cerulean City. Now, the next Pokemon on this list is one that I can see people picking if they haven't seen the anime or they haven't played the most recent games of Scarlet and Violet's DLC, the Indigo Disc. And that Pokemon is Tauros. Because until roughly Generation 4 or 6, this is one Pokemon that has such a low encounter rate that I'm sure most players have barely ever seen one during their regular playthrough. And even then, if you're lucky enough to encounter in the Safari Zone. For me, I never fully understood how to prevent a Pokemon from fleeing or be able to catch a Pokemon more easily in the Safari Zone. So I honestly never had the chance to get Tauros myself, especially in the remakes. If you guys reached this part of the video, go ahead and type in "get good" down in the comments below, because I am sure someone out there is going to tell me the strats on how to catch Pokemon in the Safari Zone. I know there's going to be a few of you. So there you have it, guys. Those are possibly some Pokemon that people may have forgotten about or aren't as well known to them. Again, Generation 1 is hard to make a list of. It's extremely iconic and has some of the most games throughout the mainline series, a grand total of 7 games. So, because of that, here's a list of some honorable mentions. Now, of course, these are in no particular order. First up, we have Farfetch'd. The anime and Generations 8's evolution Farfetch'd aside, this is a Pokemon that didn't get too much representation back in Generation 1. You could only obtain it through trade via Red and Blue and Green in Vermilion City. It was an obstacle in Generation 2 where you had to chase one around in the Ilex Forest. Lickitung. This is an odd one, and it depends on which version of the old games that you played. In Red and Green, it's only available via trade in Route 18's Gate, or the Safari Zone if you played the Japanese version of Blue. By the way, the international version of Blue is trade only. Then in Pokemon Yellow, where you have to wait pretty much the entire game because it's in Cerulean Cave, where you get Mewtwo. This is honestly one that probably most of you have missed and never realized was available originally in the game. Next up, Seaking. This is a Pokemon that probably a few of you do remember, but most probably remember its pre-evolution more. That being Goldeen, probably from Misty's Gym. Besides that, Seaking is typically only found via using the Super Rod in just a few locations. That being Route 23, Fuchsia City, you know, it's that small little patch of water there, and the endgame Cerulean Cave. Not to mention, you no doubt have other water Pokemon that you used, which, even back then in Gen 1, there was such an abundance of water-type Pokemon. 32 in total, that's roughly 21% of the original 151. So of course, you have far better options available to you like Blastoise, Slowbro, Tentacruel, Lapras, or even Gyarados. Next up, we have Tangela. As weird of a Pokemon as this one was, it is honestly not seen much in the games, especially in the later half of the future titles. However, it did get an evolution like others in Generation 4 via level up knowing a specific move, just like Lickitung. Lastly, we have Pinsir. This is probably another one of those Pokemon from Generation 1 Safari Zone. This one in particular, of course, is a bit rare, just like Tauros, but is easier to attain in Generation 2's National Park, and going even further by receiving a Mega Evolution later in X and Y. So that's the end of the video, guys. Be sure to let me know if any of these Pokemon were ones that you have forgotten or ones that just slipped your mind. Definitely let me know if there's any other Pokemon that you had forgotten that didn't show up in this list. With that being said, like, subscribe, and I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next one.